When it comes to deciding on which of the 14 Thomas specials is the most superior, I think it's fair to assume that most people will land on Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. I get it to an extent, as the film does have a lot going for it. It's plentiful with returnees, it respectfully introduces a helpless victim of yearly abuse, along with a kick-ass villain with not an ounce of sympathy left in him, a banger score, breathtaking animation, and its abundance of crazy action sequences. Other specials like The Adventure Begins, Tale of the Brave, and The Great Discovery have their fans, though Blue Mountain doesn't seem to receive the same amount of devotion as the aforementioned. It does have its enthusiasts, absolutely, but compared to the other specials, it doesn't quite seem to be as popular with the community. As you can imagine, I find that to be completely undeserved. Blue Mountain Mystery, since the day it came out, has always remained my favorite Thomas film. I still remember the hype surrounding the return of the narrow gauge engines, complete with their own distinct voices and a completely new location that looked enticing. I've been wanting to talk about my zeal surrounding this film since forever, and quite frankly, there's never a bad time to talk about one of my favorite pieces of Thomas media ever made, and that's why I've decided to check another passion project off the list. So strap your seatbelts and join me for the grand adventure ahead of us. Unlike the previous films, Blue Mountain Mystery kicks off with a prologue, which would later become the norm for future Thomas specials. While Paxton is away to be repaired, Thomas is sent to help out at a Blue Mountain quarry during his absence. He unexpectedly comes across a mysterious green engine he's never met before, and after gaining the narrow gauge engine's trust, they decide to inaugurate him in their secret. The engine is called Luke, and he's hiding at the quarry for he's done something horrible in the past. Thomas concludes that no deed can be bad enough to be permanently sent away from Sodor, and thus Luke ends up telling him about the incident. While being unloaded at Brandon Docks, he accidentally collided with a yellow engine, knocking him clean into the ocean. Luke knows this wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been unloaded first. He is 100% for certain that yellow engine was scrapped after the accident, for he was never seen again. As Thomas later discovers, the enigmatic locomotive turns out to be Victor, and thus the truth has finally been revealed. Though unfortunately, the little engines completely misunderstand the situation, and Thomas, desperately trying to put things right again, ends up hanging off a cliff due to his inability to run on narrow gauge tracks. Luke pulls him back to safety and later has a heart-to-heart with Victor. All is forgiven and all misapprehensions are cleared up at last. I cannot stress enough just how much respect I have towards Hit Entertainment for greenlighting a story this gruesome. The plot revolves around an engine thinking he's committed murder. We all know it was an accident, but that's besides the point. Luke is fully convinced that his wrong decision caused another engine's life, and subsequently puts all the blame on himself.
It was my fault. If I had waited my turn, Thomas, I would never have knocked him into the sea.
We shouldn't forget that a CGI series is notorious for being more subdued in tone, and yet Blue Mountain is really dark at times and plays its themes completely straight. As a result of the accident, Luke feels coerced to hide at the quarry, where nobody outside of everyone working here knows about his identity. However, he does make a subtle appearance during the prologue, specifically in this shot during Rhaenyra's runaway. This is quite reminiscent of the Markland engine from all the way back in season 1, which funnily enough also appeared as a scrap model cameo at the Diesel Works. But despite his past occurrence, Luke gets a chance to redeem himself during the film's climax. He valiantly manages to rescue Thomas, who's looking death directly into the eyes. This payoff still hits hard and is such a triumphant moment for Luke. The second he sees Thomas in critical danger, he will risk everything he can to go and rescue him. This scene fully reveals Luke's true character, a genuine hero who would risk killing himself in order to save someone in trouble. What an absolute Chad. I admire the entire sequence so much in general. It makes perfect sense for the engines to explode at Thomas for blurting out the secret in the context they're given. Diesel arriving immediately after didn't exactly help. But the moment they realize just how far Thomas is willing to go, do they immediately forget to be angry and are genuinely worried for their friend. However, there is one core aspect that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is Victor, the soul of Blue Mountain Mystery. Victor's role in this film is astonishing. I still can't fathom that a story involving communication barriers even exists in the Thomas universe, and yet here it is. When Victor first boarded the ship in Cuba, he was heading towards unknown territory, a completely different culture he wasn't familiar with. On Sodor, he would have to deal with snow for the first time, and of course, he'd have to learn a new language. Heading towards a new country on the other side of the world without any chance of communication sounds scary enough. And yet, he could have never been prepared for what was yet to come. Before heading towards Sodor, the ship made a detour towards Ireland, where Luke would join the deck. Once again, it's reaffirmed that nobody understands a word of what Victor says.
Hola! ¿A dónde vas? ¿Vas a Sodor?
As per the norm with British weather, it only got worse as the ship was heading towards Sodor. The heavy waves managed to snap the chains holding onto Victor's wheels, which, as we all know, will come back later to bite him in the ass. Once the ship arrived at Brendam, Luke pesters the crew to unload him first. The workmen comply without thinking much of it, and Victor realizes that his fate is now sealed. He desperately calls out for help, but there's no hope. No one understood Spanish. Due to a combination of Luke being lifted first, the horrible weather, and the negligence of Cranky and the workmen, Luke collided with Victor, who ended up rolling helplessly off the deck. He fortunately landed on a jetty, but he still had to stay there for an uncomfortable amount of time. Once the weather improved, he finally got lifted out and was subsequently repaired. After experiencing the disadvantages of being unable to speak the same language as his peers firsthand, Victor finally learned English, his first word being red, due to it being the new color he chose for himself. And shockingly enough, he seems to have almost forgotten about the incident ever since. No one would ever guess that this is how Victor has arrived on Sodor, for he's known for his chipper personality. He so easily could have turned into a sour character as a consequence of his trauma, but he didn't. He knows it was just a huge array of bad luck, and he therefore doesn't put the blame on anyone. It happened, it affected him for a while, but he managed to move on and pretty much forget about it. That is, until Thomas rapidly mentioned the event out of nowhere, and all the memories immediately start flowing back into Victor's mind.
Calderas hirvientes.
He instinctively speaks in his native language, and that's why Thomas immediately concludes that he was the Yellow Engine. At long last, the story has come full circle, and Victor no longer has to suppress his deepest secret.
I have never spoken about this, Thomas. It was a long time ago.
For all we know, Victor could have masked his wounds the entire time, which is utterly disturbing to think about. Both he and Hero, along with Kevin, made their debut in the 2009 special Hero of the Rails. Here comes this film to introduce a set of international characters from 2 different continents and with overlapping backstories too. I'm honestly kinda shocked that Victor and Hero never got a chance to interact with each other. The reason as to why I'm bringing this up is because there's one key element that separates the two. Victor's backstory is much more human. Hero's conflict revolved around him being a Japanese steam engine, which meant that parts to maintain him were arduous to come by, which ended up becoming his ultimate doom. He was left in an overgrown siding and was eventually forgotten about. Ignoring the retcons regarding Sodor's lore, Hero's history makes perfect sense, albeit it's not exactly relatable to us humans. Victor's conflict, however, is, hence why I believe that his backstory will stick with people more, for it's something that many can directly sympathize with. Victor being a locomotive doesn't matter at all in this case. He's a sentient being, unable to communicate with his new companions.
But the scariest thing of all was that no one understood me.
The more you think about it, the more it makes sense as to why he says that. If he just knew how to call out for help, none of the adversities would have ever happened. Language barriers are no laughing matter, and Victor knew that he had to learn English ASAP. Not just so that he could finally talk with others, but also in order to prevent something like this from happening ever again. Knowing what he's been through, despite always appearing exuberant on the outside, makes me respect this character even more. Now, with this much praise towards Victor, you'd start thinking that he's the sole reason for Blue Mountain Mystery's brilliance, but that's absolutely not the case. Victor's role is amazing and the best part about the film for sure, but that doesn't mean that the other characters don't get to prosper in this, because they absolutely do. I think Thomas rightfully deserves a mention in that regard. After having to suffer through so many boring seasons that flanderize him horribly, Thomas has finally become a lovable character again. His goal is very admirable, for he wants to seek out the truth regarding Luke's past and drops everything in order to fulfill his mission. He knows that it isn't right to neglect his work. He even says so in the film.
And I should be working on my branch line.
But still, his benevolence is recognized later on by Sir Topham Hatt, after the veracity has finally seen the light of day. If it wasn't for Thomas having gone out of his way to finally cure a traumatized engine's inner demons, nothing would have changed. He went through so much trouble purely out of the kindness of his heart, and he ought to be appreciated for that. Thomas may be an insolent troublemaker, but deep down he's a good guy and does whatever he can in order to improve the lives of the people around him. And that is a really useful thing to be. Not only did the already established characters get their time to shine, but previously underused faces finally got the chance to flourish. From Blue Mountain Mystery onwards, Paxton, Annie and Clarabelle have finally become actual characters. Previously, Paxton was solely used as a background diesel, a complete nobody with no personality of his own, only present to fill out the scene. And then out of nowhere, Sharon and Andrew decided to give this guy the spotlight. Everything we come to know about Paxton is perfectly set up here. He's gullible and easily gets manipulated by Diesel. He has a goofy friendship with Thomas, he isn't the brightest bulb in the box, and he often works at the Blue Mountain Quarry along with his narrow gauge friends. It's truly no wonder why Pax became so instantly popular. He may just be another class 08 on the surface, but his distinct personality and wide range of usages throughout the show are what make him stand out. The CGI series just wouldn't feel complete without Paxton. And while we're at it, CGI absolutely would not have been the same if it wasn't for Annie and Clarabelle's major character glow-ups. Prior to this, they were just NPCs who'd follow Thomas around and not really contribute to anything. But from Blue Mountain Mystery onwards did they finally get a chance to speak in the animated series, paired up with the awesome voice performance by Teresa Gallagher.
Clattering carriages! Slow down! Stop! We've overrun the signal, Thomas!
Teresa even manages to make the two sound distinct from each other. Her voice for Annie is notably deeper.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Precisely.
Thanks to the coaches being used as genuine characters did we finally get episodes that took place on the Farquhar branch again, and we all have to thank Andrew Brenner for that. The Farquhar episodes usually tend to be one of the strongest of the Brenner seasons, and that is all thanks to the amazing relationship between Annie, Clarabelle and Thomas, arguably the franchise's most iconic trio. The other main characters only have one major moment together, which is of course referring to the conversation at Tidmouth. I love the scene so much. Not just for respecting the show's lore up to that point, but also for showing how much of a family the Steam team is. They bicker from time to time and don't always get along, but the moment someone needs advice or is feeling down, does all teasing come to a halt. And speaking of units, it would be a crime to disregard the narrow gauge engines. Funnily enough, Mr. Percival already made a few cameos prior, further cementing that he and his railway were always meant to appear in CGI soon enough.
Victor has to go to the transfer yards. He has to see one of the little engines.
And by God, the Skarloey characters have returned in style. They look better than ever, are given their own distinct voices, and are finally written accurately again. I want to bring up Rheneas and Skarloey in particular, as they are the ones who've suffered the most in the hit era. At long last, their imprudent, brain-dead, horribly inaccurate portrayals are permanently behind us. They're back to being wise, experienced humorists again, and I love their banter throughout the film. You can instantly tell that these guys have decades of history behind their names.
Speaking of paint, Victor, I've been talking to Skarloey about being repainted.
Not now, Rheneas.
It's a shame that the Blue Mountain Quarry ended up becoming the only major location associated with them, but it would obviously be unfair to put the blame on Blue Mountain Mystery. To give Nitrogen credit, they gave us a whole episode that fully took place on the Skarloey Railway in the form of season 16's Don't Bother Victor. Blue Mountain not only handled its existing cast very well, but also fleshed out some minor faces, old and new. Everyone is flawlessly written and 100% in character. I think it would be a crime to not talk about the voice cast. Blue Mountain Mystery is both Michelangelo's and Michael Brandon's final Thomas production, and you can really tell that they both wanted to go out with a bang. Angelus's enthusiasm is great in this.
Rheneas pumped his pistons as never before. He had to puff across before the bridge collapsed. And then Thomas heard something that made his boiler run cold. Luke felt strong, stronger than he had ever been. The engines whistled and cheered.
Michael Legge is new to the cast and he really brought his character to life. Just like Clive Mantle as Gator, Tracy Oberman as Daisy, or Joe Swash as Sonny, he exclusively voiced one character, Luke, the only Irish engine of the whole series, making him stand out almost instantly. Legge gave a very genuine performance and has so much range, for he played both the emotional and cheerful parts flawlessly.
Thomas has made it a happy day, sir. He's my hero. He's my friend.
Michael has now retired from acting and has since become a life coach in Copenhagen, Denmark. His last acting role was in season 21's Runaway Engine.
Come on, Millie. The gravel crusher's this way. Remember?
Luke, so good to see you.
We ought to give him props for having made the tough decision to quit acting for good in order to pursue a different career. I sure as hell would not have the courage to do that. Wherever you are, Michael, I sincerely hope that everything worked out the way you wanted it to. Ben Small as Thomas is great as always. I never understood why he received so much hate. His performance is fantastic and he always puts his all into it, especially in the films.
I've asked all my friends. We're sure there is nothing an engine could do that is bad enough to be sent away from Sodor. Don't listen to him, Luke. I know what really happened. You didn't do anything wrong.
The voice fits the character well, and I personally don't find it too high-pitched at all. I get it with Keith Wickham as Percy and can't help but agree, but with Ben Small as Thomas, I don't. John Hassler absolutely deserved to take on the role from Tab onwards and is undoubtedly the ultimate Thomas, but I definitely enjoy Ben too. He also got to voice Owen and Rheneas, though once he'd left the series, Rob Ragshaw and John Hassler respectively assumed the roles. What is there to say about David Bedella that hasn't been said already? He is flawless as Victor, and due to the requirement to speak Spanish, Bedella ultimately took over the role in both dubs, albeit Wilkinson still voiced him in season 16.
Bother me? It's my job to fix really useful engines in trouble, and it makes me very happy.
Bother me? It's my job to fix really useful engines in trouble, and it makes me very happy.
They finally realized that Matt was a dreadful choice for the character, and like they did with Togo Igawa's hero, they let Dave have him in both dubs. I want to make clear that I love Matt Wilkinson. He's impeccable as Spencer and Cranky, but he as Victor was a total miscast. Regardless, he got to voice a bunch of characters such as Rocky, Rusty, and newcomers Merrick and Winston.
That's right, sir. Early days.
Steve Kinman is new to the team and he got to voice Paxton and Peter Sam, both of which are perfect.
Just a biff and a bash, Thomas. That's all. They'll soon fix me up when I get to the diesel works. Fenders and fireboxes! London Bridge isn't safe!
He also got to voice Duck and Jack, among many others, throughout the following years. Steve's range is truly remarkable, and the CGI cast just wouldn't be complete without him. Carrie Shale, as always, steals the show with his awesome diesel voice.
Nonsense, Thomas! Paxton, go and find the Fat Controller. Tell him to come here.
Keith and Carrie got to voice both controllers in their respective dubs, and they both did so sublimely.
New ones and old ones, you are all really useful engines.
While Keith is the ultimate Topham, I've warmed up a lot to Carrie's take over the years. He's definitely good too.
What I do know is that Mavis needs fixing, and no one is helping her. Please shunt her to the diesel works for repair.
Keith Wickham, as always, got to voice so many characters. His Topham is goated as always.
I told you to work on your branch line, but you're not. Toby is.
His Peregrine and Sir Handel are pretty solid.
Thank you for your work, Thomas. Paxton will now take over again. It was probably a runaway car, Thomas. There are lots of those up here.
But his best role in the film, without a doubt, goes to Skarloey. I know I'm not bringing anything new to the table by saying this, but man, Wickham was a marvelous choice for the character. I am so infinitely thankful that they went with a deep man voice for him, further emphasizing that his infantile persona will never see the light of day again.
If a big engine like me is frightened of thunder, the little sheep must be very scared.
Keith Skarloey is crazy entertaining, and you can easily tell that he had a lot of fun voicing him.
And remember, everything you've heard, you must keep locked in your funnel. Come along, Paxton. What you standing there for? Get those wheels whirring. What did you do?
Keith is easily one of the most goated voice actors the show has ever had. This guy can literally voice anyone and manages to make most of his characters sound so different from each other, and he usually gives a great performance too. Truly a master of his craft. And you know what? I'm gonna give a shout to some of the American voice actors as well. For the video, I've watched the US dub for a change, and to be perfectly honest, I was never a big Martin Sherman fan. But I will admit that he did a decent job here. I actually didn't mind hearing him. Ben's performance was notably stronger, and he was the overall better Thomas between the two, but Martin definitely had his moments.
Luke! Don't chuff away from me! Please listen! Rocky, please lift me onto Owen's platform. I have to talk to Luke!
Both he and Brandon have definitely improved when compared to Hero of the Rails. Speaking of, Michael Brandon really surprised me on my latest rewatch. His narration was genuinely great in this.
Thomas knew that his narrow-gauge friends thought he had let them down. They thought Thomas had let Luke down. That was worst of all.
He also got to voice Diesel as per usual with the Nitrogen era. While he doesn't quite compete with Carrie Shale, he honestly did well regardless.
Come down, Luke. Thomas can't help you. We know what you've done. And what you did was bad.
Glenn Rage as Cranky is great as always. His role wasn't large in the film, but he still gave a clean performance, as did Matthew in the UK dub.
All I can remember was that his light was broken, and I couldn't understand a word he said.
All I can remember was that his light was broken, and I couldn't understand a word he said.
Both Matt and Glenn are immaculate Crankies, and undoubtedly deserved a mention for that. Blue Mountain is notable for it was written by Sharon Miller and later on revised by Andrew Brenner, and somehow they managed to create a masterpiece together, for which we have to applaud both of them. Sharon may not be known for her great writing, but man did she cook here, and with Andrew on her side, it appears that the pair managed to work splendidly together. The characters have natural dialogue again, the narration, while definitely too copious, has clearly been cut down when compared to Nitrogen's previous specials. Though thankfully, when there is a meaningful conversation between characters, the narrator is mute for the majority. And lastly, let's talk about the animation. Blue Mountain Mystery is without a doubt Nitrogen Studios' swan song in every way possible. The script, characters, themes, references, and animation are all at their peak throughout. The set design and cinematography are staggering, and the new renders for the narrow gauge engines are astonishing. Peter Pham and Skarloey in particular. The former was finally given a proper diesel ejector, and the latter received such a minute detail that only hardcore fans would appreciate. The animators added a number plate on Skarloey's cab, which is a reference to this illustration from Mountain Engine. Now that is what I call attention to detail. As per usual with Nitrogen, the engines feel as if they have some weight to them. Owen struggling to pull Thomas up the incline, Luke fighting to pull Thomas back to safety, Renee's runaway, and Luke's collision with Victor all feel like beefy machinery. The sense of weight truly is an overlooked aspect of Nitrogen's animation. Not only that, but they even went as far as to send their crew from Canada all the way to Wales in order to recreate the engines as accurately as possible to their Talalan counterparts. Not to mention the abundance of unique rolling stock that appears sparsely throughout the film. All of that is a true testament of just how far the team went in order to produce the special to the highest standard possible, and by God did they manage to accomplish that.
Skarloey?
Yes, Thomas?
Who is that little green engine puffing in and out of tunnels?
Don't be silly, Thomas. You know Peter Pham's name.
But it wasn't Peter Pham. The engine looks nothing like him. Did somebody mention my name? Oh, Skarloey, do you know where these trucks are meant to go?
Coming, Peter Pham.
But Skarloey...
Listen, Thomas, we can talk another time. But right now, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Oh, fine. But this is very strange.
For as much as I love this film to death, for as much as it hits the nail on the head, and for as much as it means to me personally, there are the occasional flaws sprinkled throughout it. Only meager ones, mind you, but regardless, they ought to be mentioned. While the usage of the narrator has greatly improved when compared to previous productions, there's still too much. It's especially noticeable during Renee's runaway, but there are also other superfluous ones here and there.
Be careful up there, Thomas.
But Thomas was already far away.
Thomas and Luke were so busy talking that they didn't notice Paxton had come back to the quarry.
Thomas's questions were making Cranky cross.
And no engines whistled louder than Thomas and Luke.
Though thankfully, this has evidently been improved upon from season 19 onwards. Now, this is nothing against Martin Sherman or the US fans in any regard, but I still haven't quite warmed up to his Thomas voice yet. I don't find it that suitable for the character, and when compared to Ben Small, I definitely still prefer his take.
When Luke bumped into you, you rolled into the sea because you weren't chained.
When Luke bumped into you, you rolled into the sea because you weren't chained.
Martin didn't do a bad job by any means, but to me, he's just not on the same level as Ben. But then again, everyone's preferences will vary. Now, I'm totally fine with Percy's flashback taking place at Wellsworth rather than the shunting yard, but Henry's flashback portraying him in his new shape is definitely a glaring continuity error. They bothered to modify the Ballyhoo tunnel set in order to have it look like it did in the books, but yet they didn't alter Henry's shape, which is a bit jarring. Granted, they were pretty much spot on with Thomas's, minus the fact that his crew is still in his cab after the impact. Way later on, Arc Productions adapted the sad story of Henry themselves, albeit even more unfaithfully. Though admittedly, it's a bit unfair that Tab gets all the obloquy for not providing Henry with his old shape, despite the error stemming from BMM. If you ask me, keeping Henry's inaccurate appearance consistent within the CGI series was a fair decision to make. Thomas's attempt to search for the yellow engine is also a bit questionable, honestly. It was plot important and it doesn't drag or anything, but it still feels a little contrived. Like, wow, how lucky that Edward specifically suggested to go look at the diesel works of all places. It would have made way more sense if Thomas went there first to go search for Paxton to tell him to not spread Luke's story. Thomas isn't brain dead, he knows exactly that Pax has been eavesdropping the entire time. When he arrives, Thomas discovers that he's too late, for Paxton is already telling Diesel all about Luke. He then gets the idea to ask Cranky for his side of the story, since Brandon Docks is where Luke and Victor have first arrived. He then gets the idea to ask at the steamworks if they've ever repaired a yellow engine, and from there, everything plays out as it does in the actual film. Another bit of contrivance is during the prologue, specifically Paxton getting hit by all the debris. Like seriously, how did the rocks even reach him from there? But then again, it was plot important, so I'll give it a pass. And lastly, where did that chain on the boat go? It was still present when the ship arrived at the docks, but the moment Luke bumped into Victor, it suddenly disappeared, making it possible for him to roll into the ocean. In all fairness, these are all very minor things to point out, but I had to be fair and cover both negative and positive. And despite of all the criticism I've mentioned, none of it detracts from my own personal enjoyment I have with the film in the slightest. Now that is truly commendable.
I'm sorry I exploded at you like I did, Thomas.
It's all good, Skarloey. After all, I did blurt out the secret, albeit by accident.
But you had all the right intentions, Thomas. If you hadn't mentioned the occurrence, I still would have had to suppress my memories. And Luke, please don't feel bad about what had happened. Accidents happen all the time, especially on Sodor. I don't want you to hide or run away. I only want to be your friend.
Thank you so much, Victor. I want to be your friend too.
No hay problema, mi amigo. No problem, my friend.
And thank you too, Thomas. Without you, I still wouldn't have closure to that tragic incident. And for that, you'll always be my hero.
My pleasure, Luke.
Well then, it's off to the works with you two. Diesel and Paxton will take you there once you've been unloaded. As if I haven't been doing that today already.
Alright then, I'd best get to work. Hey, what about me? No worries, Owen. We'll get you fixed up in no time. Does nobody question how I got Victor here in only 10 minutes?
Blue Mountain Mystery, without any shadow of a doubt, is not only an impeccable masterpiece, but also Nitrogen Studios' backbone. Say what you want about the horrible writing associated with this era, but no one can deny that the team didn't try to make a kick-ass film here. It's a shame that they couldn't get measurements for Douglas due to him receiving an overhaul during that time, but even I, as Duncan's biggest fan who's ever lived, couldn't care less that he isn't in it. They still recognized him in Don't Bother Victor, which confirms that they always planned to have him and Freddy return in CGI.
And he puffed away to find Duncan.
And thankfully, he did eventually make his comeback when Arc Productions took over, starring in 2 of the best CGI episodes ever made. A true testament to Duncan's sensational character. If you were to ask me what film I find the most overrated, I'd respond with Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. No doubt is there a lot of good to be found in it, but why exactly are all its flaws disregarded by the community? Can anyone explain how the fuck John managed to get that huge ass ship all the way to the top of the hill? Literally how? And what was the point of doing that? It served absolutely nothing and made his plan even more convoluted. Blue Mountain's climax is also absurd, but at least I can just take it seriously. It's entirely character driven, it was plot relevant, and it's just feasible enough to not break the show's internal consistency. Ryan's role is almost an exact carbon copy of Stanley in The Great Discovery. Thomas doesn't like the newcomer and is antagonistic towards him, only to yet again coming around to eventually liking him. Ryan is just a nice guy whom Thomas dislikes for literally no reason at all. Seriously, what did Ryan do? Work on his branch line because Thomas knowingly fucked up hard? What was the point of Thomas detesting Ryan in order for the plot to work? To not warn him about the bad coal? But why? He could have just forgotten to tell Ryan in the moment and the story would have played out the exact same way. Why isn't Thomas just indifferent towards Ryan? It's literally just conflict for the sake of conflict. This film is the true start whether Thomas disliking the new engine and Thomas hating someone else pulling Annie and Clarabelle tropes really began to become grating, which only worsened thanks to TGR continuing both trends with Ashima. Not to mention, Thomas himself is so over the top prickish in Lost Treasure. I don't mind seeing him as a cocky shithead, but they definitely went too far. In Blue Mountain, Thomas is compassionate, empathetic, and tries to make the right decisions. He isn't stupid, but ignorant, and doesn't exactly think twice about the consequences of his actions. But he still feels like Thomas. He's not Edward, not Toby, not Rheneas or Skarloey. He doesn't always make the right choices, but in the end, thanks to his sheer will and determination, he always manages to come out on top. Thomas is written perfectly, especially when compared to how he was characterized previously.
What about me, Thomas? I'm a really useful engine too.
I'm sure the Fat Controller means a really useful Steamy. You'll never be that.
At least he's not an insufferable asshole this time. Topham was way too kind to him for all the shit that he caused in Lost Treasure. I know this is something very, very minor to point out, but this scene always pissed me off. Why is that stupid dumbass just vibing in the open? Literally, hide behind Jack. He's right there. Why is this guy not bothered in the slightest by making himself getting killed this easily? Also, how did Marion manage to dig out that treasure chest? And how unbelievably lucky that it wasn't blown up. Don't get me wrong, I completely understand why Lost Treasure is so popular, but no chance in hell does it deserve to be crowned as the best Thomas special. It's just too gimmicky for me, something I can hardly say about BMM. Blue Mountain is just tasteful enough, whereas Lost Treasure, Misty Island, and especially Marvelous Machinery are just too off the wall, and would have definitely benefited from being toned down. It shouldn't come to anyone's surprise that I wasn't exactly impressed by the recently revealed story about Super ED, which falls under the same category. I appreciate the horrifying ending, and for that alone it would have almost been worth it to have this episode produced, but the overall story was just too zany to justify making it. Blue Mountain Mystery was released a whopping 13 years ago, and yet it has still remained my favorite Thomas special ever since. I love this film with all my soul, and my undying admiration for it will never evaporate. Despite of all the rubbish this franchise had to suffer through, I will always continue to adore it, no matter how often its various owners have and will continue to soil it. This franchise deserves more respect, and we, the unlikely fandom, will always continue to honor its legacy. Thanks to us, Thomas and friends will never truly be dead. My deepest gratitude goes to everyone involved in creating Thomas the Tank Engine's most tremendous magnum opuses.
Why did they paint you yellow, Rheneas? Well, it's actually just an undercoat, but I will get my regular orange paint once it dries. Although I have to say, the colour really suits you, Rheneas. Indeed it does. Thanks, guys. I like it too. It's a shame that Duncan isn't here to see. Now hold on, wait a minute. Why the fuck wasn't I in this?